our computer was lagging really bad during the gift, so hopefully it doesn't affect what you guys see when I'm giving my talk. All right, so I titled this talk um, "Courageous for Christ" is what I titled it, and a couple weeks ago I was just thinking what about the word courage and what that means for us and what comes to mind when we think of courage. Um, Me as a child growing up, I mean, you have your typical things that a lot of kids look up, people growing up look up to, like firefighters, cops, and people and those industries and those jobs. But growing up, something I always looked up to was the like an American soldier, and um, and as I got older and I learned more about history um, and studied about D-Day, um, the amount of courage that those soldiers had to go through when they were on those boats and they were going onto the they were getting ready to storm the beach, knowing they were headed for certain death. They knew that the chances of them living through that were very unlikely for them to survive it, but yet they still went because they knew they had to keep going forward when they were on that beach to keep going. Um, Now we look at current events that are going on in this world right now. It's scary and it's real easy to get sucked into and what's going on in this world and lose our focus and lose our joy. Um, and for what? What are we losing it for if we get sucked into it? We're totally getting drawn into the world of things that we cannot control. The Lord's in complete control of it, and we have to take comfort in knowing that the Lord has control over it, and not let that consume our lives. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 6. Be strong and of good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doeth go with thee. He will not fail thee nor forsake thee. No matter what happens in this world, however crazy it gets, the Lord's always going to be there in our corner, and He's always going to have our back, no matter what's going on in this world through thick or thin, as long as we continue to serve Him and do His will. Um, so I have the definition of courage right here. I always like reading before I give talks. Like if I have a word that I'm wanting to talk about in particular, I always like seeing the definition to try to have a better understanding of the word. And this particular definition, I saw there was a bunch of different ones, but this one really stood out to me. And it says the ability to do something that frightens or terrifies one. The ability to do something that frightens or terrifies one. When we have courage and to step out for the Lord, we know the Lord's not going to let us out to dry, let us hang us out to dry. He's always going to back us up, no matter what happens. When we preach the gospel or we stand up for what is right, He's never going to turn His back on us. He's always going to be there, and He wants us to do those things, and He's going to be that much more in our corner to help us. Now, if you talk with people in the world right now, they don't know what's going on, especially with the whole COVID situation. I've talked to a lot of people, and they're just scared about what's going on, and really, physically in the flesh, it's really not that bad. I mean, if you think about someone that was I was just thinking about this too. If you think about someone that was born at the turn of the 20th century, like they went through two world wars. They went through a complete economic collapse in the 30s. They went through a pandemic, and then a lot of them that lived longer lives, they saw a Cold War on top of that as well. What's dangerous for us as Spirit-filled Christians is losing our way and losing our salvation, and the reason is for that is that it's well. Let me back up a little bit. Something that I've always noticed. Um, when people come to the Lord and they're real strong and they eventually do fall away, it's not something that happens overnight. It happens very gradually. It happens slowly. It's not something like a light switch where it gets flipped on and then it's flipped off and then you're no longer serving the Lord anymore. It happens over time. And with this whole situation with everybody being quarantined, it can be real easy for us to get into a rut and not and lose our focus and not be doing the things that we need to do. Let's go to Matthew chapter 10. Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. All right. Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both the soul and the body in hell. Like I was just saying, it's easy to get sucked into into our own little bubble, especially now when a lot of us are home a lot more, and we're not able to necessarily go out and preach the gospel or go out and gather as we normally would and have fellowship. And it can be real easy to get distracted and see the things that's going on in the world. It's a lot easier to sit at home and turn on the TV and watch the news and watch all the garbage that's going on, not in our country, but on the world stage, all the garbage, and just it can just suck you in, and before you know it, you're totally that's like the only thing you're thinking about, and you've completely lost your focus on and on something that you can't control, like I talked about in the beginning. And you're just it's just depressing when you really look at it, what's going on in the world. If you don't have the Lord, everything that's going on is just absolutely depressing, and there's no good. And it's like the Bible talks about in the last days, good will be bad and bad will be good. And I mean, if you look around, it's it's pretty bad. Um, but we have to remember, and when we feel ourselves going that direction, we have to say, hey, wait a minute, I need to pull back. I need to stop a minute and think about what's going on. We need to stop and just think about what's going on in our walks and examine what's happening in our walk. And what's really nice about now is that we have a lot more time. I mean, you don't have to go anywhere to pray or read to pray or read. And that's something that I started trying to do more of since this has all happened, is just pray and read more. And it's amazing just doing that, how your mind and how you think and just everything that's going on, how it affects because you're feeding the spirit, and you're not feeding the flesh. And it's just important that we keep that up. And then once we get that momentum going, keep that momentum going and don't slow it down. Keep it going in the right direction. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 13. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5. Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. Man cannot cause us to lose our vision or salvation. Whatever goes on in this world, if it ever gets to a point where where the government tells us we can't talk about the Bible, we can't go preach the gospel, we can't have gatherings, and they just go completely, and they're going to throw us in jail, and they're going to do all this stuff to us, and it very well could eventually get to that point. We have to make sure we know where we stand with the things of the Lord. And the only person that can cause us to lose our salvation is ourselves. And we have to remember that we have to have a relationship between you and God. And that's at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is where you stand with the Lord. And that's what we have to guard and we have to protect and make sure we have a solid focus. There, kind of like I was talking about earlier, there's so many things in this world to distract us. One thing in particular I was thinking about is I had a friend in college that, oh my goodness, all he would talk about was football, 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 football. And I mean, he could tell you every single player on every single team in the NFL. Like he could tell you the backup players, the starters, and he can name them by name. And I'm like, my goodness, you need to go pray or something because it was ridiculous. Um, and I remember when this whole the whole coronavirus thing first hit, we were going to school and we were doing all that, and he was the only thing he was worried about was, oh man, what's going to happen to the NFL season? That was the only thing on his mind. He could care less about anything else other than as long as his football was happening. And I'm like, if that's what you're looking for in life, that would just be absolutely such an empty, unfulfilling life. And I did try to preach the gospel to him. He looked at me like I had three heads. But I just said, I just could not, to me, being raised in the Lord and knowing what's right, I just could not fathom it. And it was just, we were like on two different worlds. And it was pretty wild. Let's go to Matthew, chapter 22. Matthew chapter 22 and verse 37. And Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all my soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. With all thy heart, soul, and mind. We don't need to fill our minds with the junk of this world. We need to be filling it with the fruits of the Lord. And if you look around and you really think about it, this whole world's just a big distraction. It's all set up to just make it where we're completely distracted. The speed of everything, the way everything's happening, and it's just slowly speeding up. It's just constantly trying to get us to look off the straight and narrow. Something else I was thinking about when I was writing this talk was, most of you know that I've always, like growing up, we've always had a lot of dogs, and I've always really enjoyed training them and working with them and that type of thing. But we have this one dog growing up. Some of you might remember her. Her name is Sassy. In her later years, she actually didn't get along with a couple of our dogs, so we ended up Lydia took her, and she lived with Lydia when she was older. But that dog was, just to give you kind of a background, she was a lab and German Shepherd mix. So she had all the markings or all the body type of a German Shepherd, but she was solid black, like a black lab. But she had those golden eyes of a German Shepherd. So she was completely black, and these golden eyes that just really popped. And she was extremely intense about playing ball. And I mean, she was so intense, like it didn't matter what was going on. You could have a ball out, a tennis ball out, and show it to her. And it didn't matter if bombs were going off left or right or whatever was going on. Her focus on that ball was not going to be broken. And that dog would play catch until, I think if you wanted to play her hard enough, she would go till she killed herself. She would just go and go and go and never stop. When she was doing it, she was just so focused. One time in particular, I was playing with her, and she was out in the front yard, and she was on the asphalt, and she was just going. And I noticed when she got off the asphalt, she was walking on the sidewalk, and there was like red footprints, and she actually was playing so hard and running so fast on the asphalt, she tore her pads on her paws. And if I didn't make her stop, she was not going to stop. She was laser focused on that ball. But the way you would have to get her to stop being focused on that ball, that would be her sole focus, is that you would have to hide it where she couldn't see it. and she'd go around and she would look for it for a while, and slowly it would take her a while to get to where she would slowly just kind of forget about it and go do something else. But our walks are a lot like that. We need to stay focused, laser focused on the thing, on the Lord and what the Lord has for us. And when we put the Bible on the shelf and we're not praying, and we don't have the Lord in the forefront of our mind, we lose that vision. And it doesn't happen fast. It happens slowly over time. Before you know it, you're no longer walking. And so we want to make sure we want to maintain that intensity for the Lord, and always stay laser focused for what God has for us. I got one more scripture to read, and that's in Philippians chapter 1. Philippians chapter 1 and verse 12. I'm going to read this out of the Amplified. All right, Philippians 1 verse 12. Now I want you to know, believers, that what has happened to me, this imprisonment that was meant to stop me, has actually served to advance the spread of the good news regarding salvation. My imprisonment in the case of Christ has become common knowledge throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else. Because of my change, seeing that I am doing well and that God is accomplishing great things, most of the brothers have renewed confidence in the Lord and have far more courage to speak the word of God concerning salvation without fear of the consequences, seeing that God can work his good in all circumstances. Whatever happens, even if we get thrown in jail for what we believe, God is always going to be with us. He's always going to take care of us. And at the end of the day, that's all we need. We just need the Lord on our side. The whole world can look away from us. That's what really matters. And as this world gets crazier and crazier, it's not going to get any better. It's not by man's hand anyway. We have to make sure we maintain that laser focus for the Lord. And the only thing we need to do is just remember to have that, be courageous for Christ. And all the people said.